Hey guys, DocMosh here. The release of the Hunter Files Case 1 is getting closer, so I decided to go back into the development phase once more and take a look at some design mistakes I made along the way. When I started this project over 3 years ago, I barely understood the basics of Unreal Engine. I couldn't even set a boolean without double checking if I did it right. Since then, a lot of time has passed and I have learned a lot. I'm way more confident now, and that's something I'm actually really happy about. The idea for this video came when I revisited some of the very first parts of the game. And honestly, it's a mess. It works, yes, but it could have been done much simpler. And this didn't just happen once. It happened a lot. And one of the biggest things that showed me how much I've improved was the beta test for the first half of the game. Testers kept finding more and more game-breaking issues. As I mentioned in an earlier video, one of the testers had to restart multiple times because he ran into things that just weren't supposed to happen. And that wasn't a one-time thing. It happened almost to everyone. But I learned from that, and the second half of the game was handled very differently, and that led to a much more stable version right from the start. And those "this isn't supposed to happen" moments are exactly what I want to talk about today. Basically, small oversights that turned into real problems. Luckily, they were all found during testing. And if some of you are developers as well, maybe this helps you avoid similar mistakes. Even though this is a point-and-click adventure, most of these issues can easily translate into other games. And before I continue, a quick word from today's sponsor, spoiler-free. I'll show you the issues, but I won't go too deep into story details. You'll see what happens, but not why it matters. So thank you, Spoiler-Free, for sponsoring this video. Let's start with a simple example. This character here is the city's undertaker, and he has a problem that you as the player have to solve. The structure is pretty standard. First, I disable player movement, then I switch to the correct camera. After that, I make sure both characters are facing each other, and once everything is set up, I start the dialogue and bind it as an event. So I can make sure nothing continues before it's finished. After the dialogue ends, I switch back to the original camera, give control back to the player, and remove an item from the inventory and reward the player with the screwdriver. What you're seeing here is the fixed version, but it didn't always work like this. Originally, when you completed this interaction, you got the screwdriver, and if you talk to him again, you got it again and again and again. The issue was simple. I had no reliable check to prevent it. So later on, I added a new item just to act as a condition, something I could check against to make sure this only happens once. And that's something you really need to watch out for. If you give the player something, make sure you have a system that guarantees it only happens once. The next issue was actually two problems combined, and I'm really glad this was found. At one point in the game, you have to enter a door using a code. This happens at the very end of Act 1. I assumed the player would just move forward after that, and that assumption was wrong. Here's what happens. If you enter the correct code, the door opens and marks the puzzle as completed. So the player can trigger it again. That part worked fine, but one tester decided to leave the area and come back. And here's the important detail: every scene in my game is its own level. So when you change levels, almost everything resets except for things like the game instance or save data. I saved the state of the puzzle, but I did not save the actual position of the door. So when the player came back, the door was closed again, but the puzzle was already marked as completed, which ended in a soft lock. The player couldn't enter the code again and couldn't progress. So the takeaway here is very simple: always double check what you actually save. The second part of the issue happened during the transition to Act 2. At that point, I remove a lot of unnecessary items from the inventory to keep things clean. Then I trigger a save and I switch levels. Everything seemed fine. But if the player closed the game after entering Act 1 without saving, everything broke. Because the last save happened in Act 1, but without any items. So when the player reloads, they are back in Act 1 with no items and no way to progress. Another soft lock. So here's the lesson. Always think about what happens if the player quits the game at the worst possible moment. Because they will. Next issue is this drone. At some point you have to use a specific item on it. That item is actually used twice in the game. Once here and once somewhere else. What I didn't consider was that the player could just use it twice on the same object. And yes, that completely breaks progression. I never even thought about that possibility. But one of the testers did, because the code only checks for the item and not if you already done it. Then there's a function I actually thought was pretty smart, but turned out to be not that great in every moment. When the player uses the door, the game checks a couple of things first. Is it an actual door, or can you just walk through it? That's mostly for a small animation like whether Nate grabs the handle or not. Then it checks if a minigame is required, like the one you saw earlier. After that, it checks if the door is locked, and depending on that, things like items can change the state. So if everything is valid and Nate is allowed to go through, a sequence of things happens. First, I use something called an interaction volume. That has nothing to do with the door itself, it just tells Nate where to walk when you click on something. So when Nate reaches that point, an animation starts where he walks to the door. And once the animation is finished, the level transition happens. Normally that works completely fine. But in some cases, I adjusted the size of that volume, sometimes bigger, sometimes smaller, and this can lead to an issue. Because if Nate can't properly finish his walking animation to the door, he just gets stuck. And the level transition never happens. So to fix that, there's a function called force on collide. Basically, if Nate touches the trigger box for the level transition, he goes through, no matter what. That sounds right, right? For normal doors, it's completely fine, but for doors that should only be accessible later in the game, this becomes a problem. Because if the player somehow skips the normal interaction and just touches the trigger volume directly just by walking to it, without clicking on the door, the force check kicks in. And suddenly Nate can enter areas he's not supposed to reach yet. It doesn't soft lock the game, but it breaks progression, and that's a big problem. So yeah, this was just a small look back at some of the things that went wrong during development, and there are definitely more. If you're interested, I can go deeper into other mistakes in another video. I'll also post updates about release timing and platforms on my Discord. And I'm planning to make a follow-up video about the game's performance about a month after the release. If that's something you like to see, let me know. Thanks for watching.